The defense force would not pick up on it and direct their aggression at Egu. They had already told the villagers about the giant of the east and the serpent of the west, as well as the fact that their power rivaled that of the wise king of the forest. Although the beast had been tamed by the dark hero, the mighty monster's form and presence had been etched indelibly on the villagers' hearts. Fear was the appropriate response to the thought of fighting something on the same level as that, foes which they had no chance of beating. So the serpent of the west uses weird magic? Damn, what a pain. Nymphyria nodded at Brida's mumbling. Usually, monsters with racial spells won't have more than 10 of them, but if they're the type which can practice and learn magic, they'll have access to many more, which makes them troublesome. If they know magic that allows them to cross the walls, I'm glad that Enfi and the goblins can use it, but letting the enemy use magic is cheating. Enri said so in an unhappy tone, which drew grim smiles from the villagers. But don't tell Gaunsama I said that, okay? That follow-up made the villagers smile. That should lighten things up a little, Enri thought. Although it would be bad if they were too relaxed, being too tense would also keep them from fighting effectively. The mood now seemed just right. Jugemu looked gratefully at Enri. It would seem he understood that point as well. Defense force, don't worry. Just stay far away and shoot. We'll handle the front line. The goblins had trained the defense force for precisely this role, so this was the best way to deploy them. Gathering enough swords and armor to equip everyone in the defense force was very difficult in a small village. And in the end, they were still villagers. They might have strong arms from using hoes and shovels, but that did not translate into sword skills. Only a genius could train himself into a warrior of a level that could defeat monsters in his free time between chores. With those points in mind, the goblins realized that they could not train the defense force to a level where they could handle frontliner duty. Instead, they decided to teach them archery to let them fight from the back line. Although their technique had improved and they could hit their targets, they could not pull the strong bows which had good penetrating power, making it difficult to inflict damage on thick-skinned monsters. However, if they were lucky and fired in unison, there was a chance they might hit a vulnerable spot. All right, just like we trained, line up and take aim at the other side of the door. Egu, you come in after the main door gets broken down. Stand with the defense force and stab the enemy with spears. Treat Brita-san's commands as though they came from Ain-san, and listen to her. Oh. Leave it to me. That's the spirit. Now, listen up. I forbid you to run. Fight like mad until you die. Of course. I'll definitely repay the kindness you showed by saving me. In fact, why not put me at the front line with the ogres? You stupid kid. If I let you do that, you just end up dying in a few seconds. You can say that once you get stronger. After being scolded by the leader, Egu's face was filled with regret, and some of the defense force members went to comfort him. Enri sighed in relief as she saw this. For one, it meant that the villagers did not see him as the reason for bringing the monsters in. For another, it was proof that Egu was accepted by the villagers. They were the last outsiders to arrive in the village. Although they had not been shunned or treated badly, there was still a distance between them. However, from the look of things, that gap would vanish if they won today. It was ironic that the battlefield was the best place to build the bonds of camaraderie. And it was because he felt that divide that Egu fought so fiercely. His objective was to contribute to the village and raise the standing of himself and his people. It was the same in human society, which respected those who shed blood for them. Considering his people's status depended heavily on how Egu and his two friends performed, it was only natural that he was so passionate about it. Enfi, I have something to ask of you. Enri stood beside Nymphyria and whispered into his ear. Oh no, further a little, got it. Then, Egu, I have something to entrust to you and your friends, is that all right? I'm going to give you my alchemical items, so I hope you'll use them well. Nymphyria opened his satchel. Inside were many bottles and paper sachets. Use these and throw them at the enemy. You'll miss if you're too far away, so try to use them at medium range. Are you ready for this? Leave it to me. I'll accomplish this task perfectly. Egu accepted the satchel, and as they were waiting, one of the goblins shouted down to them. They're on the move. No doubt about it, they're heading this way. If one were to listen, they could hear the sounds of many monsters rending the night. All right, defense force to your positions. Ain-san, watch out. Ani-san, you too. Yes. I got it. Don't any of you die, please. Leave it to us. Now then, let's go, Enri. Nfiria ran up to Enri as her escort. Their job was to inspect each house to see if anyone had not noticed the emergency. As they watched Enri leave, the goblins went to battle stations. Self-defense force, to your places. Wait for the enemy to enter the target area. There was no direct line of fire to the monsters outside the wall. They would need to shoot in an arc to do so, but amateurs could not do that, and they did not have the time to train them to that level. Therefore, the goblins responsible for training the defense force decided to specialize them in one task. They trained the defense force to land arrows on the other side of the wall. That meant learning how much force to use, and practicing the right angle to shoot at in order to accurately hit a specific area. It was training that was completely useless outside of very specific circumstances. However, since the enemy's aim was to break down the gate, and they were massed in front of it to single-mindedly attack the gate, the training was very effective. The monsters' cries drew closer, and the main gate shuddered under a series of impacts which could be felt in the nearby walls as well. Very good. Enemies are at the target area. Suppressive fire begin. Here we go. In response to Jujuma's shout, the goblin archers on the watchtower's shuriken and girindai began shooting. As long as their target was within their line of fire, the marksmen of the goblins could not. Mississippi screams of agony rose up from the other side of the door. The awful din of the battlefield filled the air, making the members of the defense force tremble in fear and nervousness. Amidst all this, Jug-Emu shouted once more. Defense force hold. Do not raise your bows until ordered. They were told not to shoot when the enemy had reached the place they had spent countless hours learning to shoot. However, in the next instant, everyone who looked at the towers understood the reason for that. Rocks hurtled over from the other side of the wall. Each one was about the size of a human head. Although many went astray, even a lucky hit on the watchtowers made them shake visibly. Rock throwers confirmed. Enemy rock throwers have multiple rocks remaining. Each one has about 3 rocks, and roughly 21 rocks in total. Whoa. Another thrown rock struck a watchtower, and the wood splintered. If they began shooting, the defense force would become targets too. It was true that the defense force was out of sight of the enemy, and their accuracy would be low. However, if they were unlucky, a single hit could kill people. Even a weakly thrown rock could severely injure someone. One could say that Jug-Emu had ordered them not to attack for safety's sake. It also showed that Jug-Emu did not want anyone to die before the extended battle could commence. Don't think we can't hit you just because you're throwing rocks at us. Girindai shouted angrily, and began shooting again, while weaving through the hail of flung rocks. The defense force could not tear their eyes away from him, watching the way he fearlessly returned fire, knowing that he would be severely hurt if he was hit. However, Jug-Emu was not watching him. He quickly surveyed the battlefield and found new enemies in an instant. Humei. Climbing snakes on the left flank. Can you handle that by yourself? No problems, leader. Leave it to me. Humei, who had been standing by in the rear, spurred his wolf forward. Ahead of him were the giant snakes climbing the wall. 15-16. You two hang on a bit more. There was no need for Jujuma's words. Not a hint of fear could be seen in the shooting stances of the 2 archers atop the listing watchtower. Though the tower would collapse under them even without further attacks, they continued targeting the monsters and baiting rock attacks. On the left flank, Humei seemed to be doing well against the snakes. Finally, the watchtower bent and broke under the barrage of thrown rocks. Shuriken and Girindai jumped down to the ground, rolling several times to disperse the impact of their fall. Defense Force archers ready. In response to the call, the archers prepared their bows. Breathe deep. In out. In pull. This voice was just like their training, and for a moment, the Defense Force archers forgot they were on the battlefield. They ignored the sound of the timbers creaking and performed the same movements like they had learned during practice. Loose. 14 arrows traced beautiful arcs through the sky and vanished behind the wall, drawing more screams of pain from the monsters. Amazing, Egu muttered to himself, but Jugemu did not have the time to bother with him. Second wave ready. Don't panic. Breathe deep. In out. In pull. By this time, Shuriken and Girindai had been healed and took their places by the defense force. Loose. Once again, 14 arrows flew forth, followed slightly later by 2 more. The door creaked louder as the cries from the enemy intensified. The arrows must have gotten them mad, and made them hit harder. Back up. Change weapons. The defense force moved as a group behind the barricades positioned behind the main gate. Anyone charging in would be stuck on the sturdy bars and spikes of the obstacle. The arrangement was in an L shape, leading the attackers to where Jugemu and the ogres were waiting for them. For the intruders, breaking through the gate would be like jumping from the frying pan into the fire. If you see any magic casters, get out of their line of fire. Leader. What's the matter, Egu? Anisen gave me some alchemical items and there's glue in there. Where do you want it? Will it be absorbed by the mud? Yes, but he said it would only shorten its effective duration. If so, then wait for a good opportunity and jam up the entrance. After showing they understood, Egu and his tribesmen moved off as one. Kumiai returned after defeating the snakes and immediately headed off to the goblin cleric to receive healing. There was the sound of wood splintering, and one side of the main gate was down. Enemy ogres surged through the breach. Cuckoo, a bunch of brainless fools. Jugemu mocked the incoming enemies. They had made a fatal mistake. The monsters had only broken down one side of the doors. Once that side was down, they gave up on breaking down the other side, and forced their way in, especially since they were afraid of being hit by arrows if they remained outside. However, with only one side of the door down, they could only come in one at a time, which meant a lot of enemies were stuck squeezing through the entrance. In addition, they were caught in the angle of an L-shaped ambush, where all the defenders could focus their attacks on a small number of attackers at a time. Welcome to the kill zone. Time to die. The armed ogres on the village's side had an advantage in a slugging match against their wild counterparts, and the defense force had their spears to assist. Any ogres who tried to break down the barricades would be taken down by the goblin archers, the goblin sorcerer, and Egu's alchemical items. The goblins would handle any beasts who broke through amidst the chaos. The situation was overwhelmingly favorable to them, and there were still the goblin riders standing by in reserve. If the enemy had no magic casters, their victory would be assured. However, what's that? Panic crept into Jujuma's voice. Is that a troll out there? It looked different from an ogre, but it was about the same size. It lurched stiffly toward the defenders, emitting an oppressive presence as it came. In its hand, it held a greatsword with an unnatural air about it. A moist substance flowed from the middle of the blade to its edges. That must be some form of magic. The boss took the field? Could that be the giant of the East? It certainly looked that way. Its strong body looked like it had been trained until it was as hard as steel, and it was completely unlike any of the trolls that Jugemu knew. At a glance, he could see how it could be on par with the beast of the south. Just one troll would require all of the goblins to handle. It was an enemy that was tougher than any they had ever faced. If that's the case, Jugemu thought about what to do. It seemed hopeless. The best way would be to cover Enri's escape. If she did not want to, then even if they had to force her, no, that's not the best way. That's the worst way, and our last resort. Having given up on that course of action, Jugemu spoke to his goblin troops. Oi, you lot afterwards, every single one of us is going to die. Don't even think about childish things like falling back. Make sure you brand your heroic forms into everyone's eyes. The goblins answered with a roar full of fighting spirit. In an instant, enemies and allies alike seemed to freeze. Here we go, lads. Let's show them the power of Ain San's boys. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. After a circuit of the village, and confirming that nobody had been left behind, Henry breathed a sigh of relief. Just then, the sound of something breaking came from the front. It was followed by battle cries from both sides, and the thunderous bass sounds churned her guts. That was probably the sound of the gate breaking, and the goblins joining battle. She swallowed the bile that had flowed up her throat from stress. The bitter taste remained in her mouth, but she ignored it to look at Nymphyria. Enfi. We should be heading to the gate. Understood. But you need to go to the rendezvous point and reassure everyone, okay? Enfi's words had the subtext of don't get in everyone else's way. Henry had also been trained in the use of a bow, but now that the gate had been broken, the battle would have moved into close quarters with a spear. To be honest, even if Henry went there now, there was little she could do. I can't do that. I chose to lead the goblins and the villagers, and as long as I'm able, I need to do that. Although falling back is the correct thing to do, I can't do it. She had to stand on the front lines and see how the battle was fought. After seeing the conviction in Henry's eyes, Nymphyria swept his hair aside to reveal his hardened features. That's true. I understand. I'll protect you. The serious expression on her childhood friend's usually placid face made Henry's heart beat in strange and wondrous ways. What's wrong, Henry? I know, I'm not as cool as Gaun-san, but I won't let you die. Don't say die. Ah, I'm sorry. That. As she saw her childhood friend struggle for the words to use, like he always did, Henry smiled. Let's go, Enfi. Ah, yes. That's right, we don't have time to waste on talking. The two of them ran to the front gate. Because they had started running from the rear gate, which was furthest away, it would take them a while to get there even if they ran at top speed. And if they got there gasping for breath, they would only get in the way if the fighting was underway. In order not to let haste make waste, they proceeded at a moderate speed. However, they only ran for a few seconds. The two of them heard a stomach-churning sound and halted in their tracks. Looking back, they saw something revealing itself from behind the wall. It was massive and bizarre. It was much bigger than its human equivalent, and for a moment they could not figure out what it was. In truth, it was a finger. Something clutched the top of the back gate, which was 4 meters tall, with its hand. What's that? A giant? I don't know. Nymphyria's words cut off halfway, and his mouth hung open. Henry frantically turned to look at what had stunned him, and ended up making the same expression. Something was slowly climbing the wall. Something which could not possibly be a human being. Could that be a troll? As she heard Nymphyria breathing those words, Henry stared at the emerging monster. What's that? Although it's the first time I've seen one, it's exactly like how I've heard it would be. If that's really a troll, we'll be in trouble. Trolls are opponents that even gold-ranked adventurers would have trouble beating. Honestly speaking, even Jugemu and the others would probably have a hard time. Henry felt the blood drain downwards as she heard about something that was stronger than the mightiest being in the village. The troll that was revealing its massive silhouette snorted, and it slowly looked around its surroundings. Nymphyria grabbed Henry by the hand, dragged her into the shadows of a nearby house. He covered her mouth and then whispered into her ear. Henry, trolls have very sensitive noses. It's okay for now since we're downwind, but it's too soon to rest easy. You need to get out of here, then meet up with the goblins. Henry drew closer to Nymphyria and whispered back into his ear. I can't, Enfi. If we let that guy go to the main gate, everyone will die in the pincer attack. That might be the case, but right now, we can't. We're the only ones here. That means it's up to us to stop it. Between the gap in his hair, Nfiria's eyes looked at Henry like she had gone mad. Granted, Henry did realize she had just asked for the two of them to do the impossible, but there was no other way. We don't need to win or defeat it. We just need to delay it. Enfi, please lend me your strength. How are we going to delay it? Lure that guy away from here? I suppose I could fight it directly, but I doubt I could take even a single hit from him. Nfiria's quiet words revealed a calm determination inside him. In response, Henry laid out her plan. I've got a plan. For starters, let's make some ogres. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. The troll stared briefly at a wooden, human-made house and began to move. All the houses smelled of soft, delicious humans, but it knew that was just leftover scent. After verifying there were no other scents in the area, it began striding toward the direction where the sound of battle was coming from. The sound of humans fighting its brethren made it drool, and it imagined the humans that would be there. A soft, lovely feast of human flesh. As a gourmet among trolls, it loved the meaty limbs and disliked the bitter innards. Therefore, it was rare that it could eat its fill, but now it looked like it would get the chance to do just that. Its strides grew longer as it drooled in anticipation. However, the troll halted and looked carefully around its surroundings. Or rather, it looked into the shadows of a nearby house. There were ogres. The smell of ogres was wafting out from there. It frowned. Although ogres were its allies, there was a slight difference in the scent it was picking up. It was one of which he had no prior memory. And now it was coming from behind the house, surrounding him. Of course it had not come to this conclusion, because its nose was as sensitive as a bloodhound's, but because it had remembered the unique odor of its ogre allies. As such, it did not know how many ogres there were. And that brought up a question. There was a mysterious smell here as well, like the smell of crushed grass, but far stronger. Had those ogres smeared themselves with the juices of shredded grass? It pondered this question, and was confused. The strong herbal odor stung its nose, and its tears were about to flow. If the ogres could endure this stench, it must have been because they had a bad sense of smell. It could take them on face to face. As a troll, it was much stronger than any ogre. However, that did not mean it could escape unscathed, and it would take time to deal with them. Because trolls had the racial ability of regeneration, their wounds would recover over time. However, regenerating its injuries would still take a while, which was troublesome. Who knew, its fellow ogres might have eaten all the humans by the time it got there. Since the opposition had dispersed, they must be planning to attack all at once when it moved to attack. It felt a glimmer of pride at seeing through its opponent's plan, and slowly began moving again, intending to circle around the house. Its aim was to destroy them all quickly. Thus, the fact that its opponents had split up was a golden opportunity. All it needed to do was slay the ogres one by one, starting with the one at the edge of the group. It moved slowly, taking care not to make noise, but suddenly, a small shadow dashed out of a nearby house. It was not a goblin, but one of its favorite prey, humans. In contrast to the troll who had been surprised into inaction, the caped human splashed something upon it. Agua! The troll screamed from the overpowering stench. The green stuff emitted a powerful stink which burrowed into its nose and sinuses. This reek was several times stronger than that of the grass-stained ogres. Even though it could regenerate, this was not a wound it could heal. It simply could not endure the smell. Its eyes watered and it took a step toward the human, but it had already run back into the house. The reason why the human had managed to get so close despite the troll's keen sense of smell was because the human's scent had been masked by the scent of the crushed grass. Angered by the loss of its target, the troll returned to its earlier target, the ogres. First, it would kill the ogres and then find that tantalizing food, humans, the troll thought. The troll circled the house angrily, but did not find any signs of the ogres. It was as though they had vanished into thin air. Go where? It looked around. Ogres were large, despite being smaller than itself, but it could not find any ogres. Once they moved their massive bodies, the troll should have spotted them eventually. Could those puny ogres go invisible, like their master? The troll was confused by another situation it could not figure out, and snorted. However, the strong stink of herbs rising from its own body interfered with its sense of smell, and it could not follow the ogre's scent trail. Goo! The moaning troll scraped experimentally at the fluid on its body. This time, its fingers stank. Glancing around, the troll found a fallen piece of cloth on the ground. The troll considered that it might be good to wipe itself off with the cloth, and picked it up with a curious expression on its face. It brought the cloth to its nose and sniffed. Its nose might have been disabled, but it could still pick up a bit of scent. The troll smelled ogre on the cloth, and suddenly, it understood. It had mistaken this cloth that reeked of ogre stink for an ogre itself. This was not a coincidence. Hyamans! Roaring angrily, the troll started looking around its surroundings. No humans. Then they should still be in their homes. The troll's fist pounded angrily at a nearby house, and after hammering at it several times, it reached up to tear the roof off, intent on destroying the interior. A human rushed out in a panic as it was demolishing the house. Eager to tear the human apart as well, it gave chase. Diamond Suit, the target, the troll, was chasing her. That meant the plan was working. Though she was grateful for that, her heart was on the verge of seizing up, and she wanted to cry. A gigantic, man-eating monster was pressing in from behind, and this high-stakes game of tag, if she lost, she would disappear down that monster's throat, was something which would drive an ordinary village girl to tears. The fact that she did not know how long she would have to play this game made her want to cry that much more. If she knew when it would be over, she might have been able to will herself to keep fleeing until the very end. However, she did not know when the battle at the gate would end or if anyone had noticed this deadly game of cat and mouse, and whenever she thought about these discomforting things, she felt her strength ebb away. Henry regretted not sending someone over to the main gate to make a report, but the preparations had taken too long. She ran with all her strength, rushing into the house where Nympharia was waiting. In turn, Nympharia rushed out of the back door, wearing the same hooded cape that she was. Henry held her breath, gulping and hoping that the enemy had not seen through their scheme. The troll continued chasing Nympharia, not having noticed the switch. Henry calmed her ragged breathing and clasped her hands in delight. Trolls were far superior to humans in stamina, stride length and physical ability, therefore a single person running away would definitely be caught. In order to recover stamina and move for extended periods, they decided to switch with each other without letting the enemy notice. This was intended to both buy time, and to keep it from going to the rendezvous point, where the people were. The question, then, was how to deceive it. How could trolls tell humans apart? Maybe if they lived together long enough they would have a few ways, but this was not nearly long enough. Practically speaking, it would be by appearance, especially clothing. As such, Nympharia and Henry had worn the same rain capes and ponchos. Next, they had to keep it from differentiating between the two of them via its sense of smell, and the herbal juice was meant to take care of its keen nose. Henry had prepared 2 traps based on scent. One was to use the ogre stink to halt it in its tracks, and the other was using the stench of the herbs to disorient it. After she got her breathing under control, Henry began stealthily moving to the next house. She crept into the darkened interior of the house, peeking at the situation outside. With a dong sound, Nympharia ran inside at top speed. At this moment, Henry ran out again from the back door by which she had entered. But then Henry realized that the troll was not following her, even though she had run out of the house. The troll snorted, then looked between Henry and the house. Its ugly face contorted even further. She guessed that the look on its face might be surprise. Cold sweat beaded on Henry's throat. She touched herself unconsciously, and her hand came away, cool and wet. Its nose is used to it? The troll had gotten used to the smell of the herbs, and now it was suspicious of the smell of her sweat. It seemed to have realized that there were 2 humans. The troll raised its hand and brought it down onto the house. Nympharia ran out again. However, his footsteps stopped, and he did not look like he was going to flee. Henry. Run away. I'll buy you some time. Idiot.